What strategies can people use to mitigate against burnout?
Journaling is one. It can be a good starting point for reflection. I think overall, when it comes to really making any change in your life, be it trying to avoid burnout and have healthier habits or, whatever it might be, I think reflect, brainstorm, experiment, and sustain. So reflecting, going a little bit deeper with yourself, being really honest with yourself, maybe working with someone else that can also help you go and maybe ask those questions like a coach or something like that. Brainstorm again with other people if possible of what could I do? Experiment then, ideally starting off with something that's low pressure, low stakes, trying out something new. It can start off with something really minor that you might think that's not going to make any impact, but sometimes it's those little changes can kind of accelerate and build up over time. And then sustaining whatever does work for you. So who might hold you accountable? How do you make it as easy as possible to keep up those new habits, as difficult as possible to fall into older habits? So I think as I said, so that reflection piece, things like journaling or working with others can help. Another strategy that I sometimes use with clients where they are those kind of high achievers. They are those people that like to achieve things and that like to get things done. What I would say is set a goal that you can achieve that's outside of work and separate to work. Because again, a problem that people sometimes face is when they're trying to set boundaries, they might say something like, okay, I'm going to try to, not check emails out of office hours. But then, if you do get that urge to check them, there's nothing really stopping you. And if you do not check your emails, it doesn't really feel like, oh, I've achieved something, because you just didn't do something. So I would say, setting something that makes you feel like you've achieved something, like it could be, I'm going to read 2 chapters of my book this evening, or, I'm going to time how long it takes me to run 3 kilometers. And then next week, I'm going to compare my new time, or I'm going to prepare my favorite meal from scratch.
It's really about adding value to someone's life versus taking things away. And you see that a lot with the health industry as well. Or if you're on a diet, it's often restrictive versus like adding in good foods. It's probably more so taking away bad foods. And it seems like a similar concept here.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good kind of parallel to make, that when we do feel, like we're restricting ourselves, we're not getting that kind of reward system. We're not really activating the, yes, I did it kind of thing.
Why did you say outside of work when it comes to setting goals?
I think like if we're trying to set those kinds of boundaries, obviously it's so important to have goals professionally and personally. Of course, it's okay to have goals that do relate to work. But I think if we're trying to build healthier habits all around, achieve greater balance, achieve greater well-being, these are the things that can often get neglected. It's our, what we eat, how we move, who we connect with. People can often feel like, oh, I don't have time for that. But if you were really trying to prioritize it, it can, I suppose you're building it into your daily routine, and it can still lead to that feeling of accomplishment, which again can kind of help us sustain that habit and tick that little box for the high achievers who are really accustomed to achieving things and being needed or being important or accomplishing tasks.
Yeah, you're building that sense of momentum for those people as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose other strategies as well, sometimes it is like we didn't touch too much on, that work demands piece, but I think, the way that work is set up, there's always going to be room for improvement. If your work falls apart without you, it is not set up successfully. Like part of the work that we do with Jigsaw Better Business is around improving operations, right? So what if someone was unexpectedly ill or they quit? Is all of their knowledge just in their brains and we've just lost it? If so, then we're really, setting ourselves up to fail. So I think if you are, I think especially for managers, if you're looking at your team and, if someone goes on holidays and everything falls apart, like there's definitely work to be done in terms of the systemization of your work. I suggest having a kind of maybe brainstorming session of, all right, what if me and my team all just won the lottery? We did a syndicate and we go, we're out of here, we're quitting. Who's going to take over and how difficult would it be for that new team? There should be kind of maps detailing out how to do that work so that a brand new employee could pick it up as easily as possible. And that's going to mean that there's less of all the pressure is on this one person or this one team, to get everything done. Because again, if you feel that level of pressure and those high work demands and that unmanageable workload, then yeah, it's going to lead to burnout. So it's really like we mentioned there, the sustainability, the longevity of how we are doing this work, I think is a really important one as well for managers, especially, I think. And there is help that you can get that's out there to help you do that.
Julie, can I ask you a question around the systemization piece?
Mhm.
In an ideal world, I think it is great that like no information is lost, no matter who is present or not. Like I can use it as a sports term, like who's a good manager when if he can't turn up, like the team still perform and execute the same formation and strategy. In a world that we're in now, where layoffs are so prevalent, do managers or even employees have resistance to this systemization? Like they want to be indispensable. They want to hold information because it's seen as a job security mechanism in a way.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, definitely. And, this is the case prior to, the amount of layoffs that we see and those very prolific ones that we hear. People can always feel a little resistant to some kind of change, especially if it's a threat to them. People are constantly scanning their environment and going, is this a threat or is this safe? So yeah, I think like the change management skills are going to be huge there. And I think that, again, in an ideal world, if you make improvements to your processes and it results in someone not needing to do that work, that they would then be redeployed and their skills would be used elsewhere. And they would then feel, I'm adding more value to this organization rather than doing this stupid task that takes me 10 hours a week and it should only take me 1 hour a week, So again, obviously in an ideal world, like we're kind of trying to put ourselves out of a job, but finding where is the most valuable work, how can I add value, and spending more time on that.
Yeah, it gives you like a higher order position. Like you said, you don't want to be doing mundane tasks. And especially with the integration of AI now, that's gone to a whole new level as well. We can work a lot more efficiently, I guess, if you use AI in the correct terms as well. But with that comes severe job security fears. So yeah, we're definitely in that kind of moving landscape at the moment when it comes to workplace culture and like the integration of AI and systemization and automation as well.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I think like if you are bringing in any kind of changes in your workplace, like being considerate of how do people feel in terms of like their sense of certainty, their sense of status, like if you're doing something that is telling them you're not that important, then yeah, we're going to get that resistance to change. Like people always go, oh, people are so resistant to change. And it's like change is constantly happening. We're not all totally resistant to it. But when there is forced change that we can't see the value in, then yeah, of course we're going to resist it, So I think being mindful of how you communicate it, how you bring it in, and going back to what we said there earlier of, is there that culture of, hey, let's look for continuous improvement. Let's look for ways of, resolving issues before they become worse. Again, that's that ideal culture that we want to create where it's safe to look for and make improvements and no one's taking it as a threat, really.
Yeah, again, that's as we were speaking, that is such a key component. Again, that trust has to be like the underlying tone of all of this to be able to function.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any more strategies that we haven't discussed when it comes to preventing burnout?
I think that something that has helped me is realizing that you can't always do it alone and you don't have to do it alone. I think I'm quite an independent person. My mom would always say that when I was like 2 years old, I'd be like, I'm doing it myself, trying to put my shoes on. And it's like, so I'm like, I've always liked to, be self-sufficient. But sometimes, yeah, it is a case of, okay, I have this skills gap. Like I mentioned, I had managers who would then support me. This seems intuitive to me, but I have a good few years of experience on you. So let me help you. So I think trying to take that first step, which again can be quite difficult, to be a bit vulnerable and say, I'm struggling or I don't know how to do this, talking to maybe a manager to help you kind of keep you accountable in establishing those sort of more healthy work habits, maybe working with a coach or someone who's external to the situation. Of course, you can turn to friends, family, partners for support, but sometimes they can be a little bit too close to the situation, and they'll go, oh, just quit, or that manager is terrible, or this work is awful, you should just leave. So it's not always going to be the advice that you need. Whereas, a manager probably hopefully will have your best interest at heart, but also have the, wanting to achieve results in the business at heart as well. So working with someone who's within the business or a coach who's a little bit external to your situation can be useful. And then other than that, I really think just getting clear on who you want to be. What is success to you? Another reflection exercise I did recently was, what does an ideal day look like? What does an ideal year look like? And spending time just visualizing that, to really just get that sense of, how do I want to feel? Where do I want to be? And then trying to recognize, how far away from that am I? What's getting in my way what's preventing me from achieving that or living that life? I think as well, diversifying who you spend time with or what you focus on. So again, I think it can just be so valuable because if we mentioned that a lot of people might be surrounded by other stressed out people, other people who are maybe really trying to continually achieve and strive and, be under pressure. And that seems to be the only way to achieve, is to be under pressure. But actually spending more time with maybe people who are doing things a little differently and just getting those different perspectives. It's not that you have to become like that different person, but just getting those different perspectives. Like, for example, I was spending time with someone who runs her own business, and one of her kind of mantras for her business is, it gets to be easy. And I love this because I think, obviously many people starting their own business, they kind of start off thinking, I'll get to just, have my own hours and I'll be totally free, but it often doesn't pan out that way. And people end up kind of working more than ever when they're running their own business. Whereas she set hers up in a way that she's earning money not based purely on how many hours she's working. And so sometimes, she's like looking at other successful business owners and going, oh, should I be putting more time and more effort? Should I be more stressed? But now she reminds herself that it gets to be this good. I intentionally created it this way. So I think just, seeing those different perspectives of, maybe it doesn't have to all be difficult in order for it to be meaningful.
That's again falling into like the social norms scenario, right? That if you are a business owner, that you should always be super busy, maybe high stress, go, go, go. Another thing that stood out for me was you mentioned about hanging out with different people or spending time with different people. And that was really interesting to me in the sense we're talking about mitigating against burnout, because you do often hear like, oh, you are a reflection of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. And they can mean that in a positive sense, like if you good influences around you, that it'll help change kind of who you are in a positive light. And you flipped that in a way, but then got onto that point, right? You said if there is people that are, I don't know, you didn't really use the phrasing overly negative or anything like that, but if something's not serving you or maybe keeping you in a stressful environment, that you can remove yourself from that and maybe seek more positive influences or more like different influences to give you different perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't mean you have to cut everyone out of your life, but like if you recognize like, how do I feel when I'm around them, or do I necessarily want to emulate kind of what they're doing? And if the answer is no, then like, reminding yourself that there are ways to connect with other people. Even if you live in a remote area, you could connect with someone online. There are those possibilities, but it just requires getting out of that comfort zone. And I think that ties in with a lot of what we've talked about here. Like anything can become the comfort zone, right? Whether it's being stressed and overworked, that can become the norm, or being surrounded by other maybe negative people, that can become very normal. It does feel uncomfortable to step outside of it, but that discomfort is natural. It's a signal that we're learning and growing. So I would definitely suggest trying to meet new people, or maybe, even just beginning to change up the routine a little bit, like, reading a book that you wouldn't usually pick up, or, trying a new exercise class, or just taking a different route to work, like really starting really, really small and just seeing what changes can come about from those very small little actions that are very manageable. But I think shaking up that routine can lead to you changing your perspectives a little bit more.
Loaded question incoming. We've spoken about we've spoken about multiple strategies to overcome burnout. In your opinion, which of these is the most difficult for people to implement and why?
That is a good question. It's probably that kind of identity piece, changing that belief about who you are, because as I say, it can be so long standing. I think that would be quite a challenge for a lot of people. But at the same time, I think I have met plenty of people who maybe, like a lot of us, if we look back at our younger self and we go, oh, why did I act that way? Or why did I think that way? But I suppose, again, that little feeling of a cringe can tell us that we're growing, that we're developing. So I do think that change is always happening, but it's just kind of ensuring that we're being a little bit intentional about it so that we can guide ourselves in the desired direction. And I suppose just getting clear on that desired direction and not just falling into assumptions of what success looks like or what meaningful or fulfilled life looks like.
And you mentioned when you were going through the strategies that you do not have to do it alone, like trying to analyze we'll say your deeply ingrained beliefs since childhood, like that. Not everyone can just do that effectively. You do need some help, whether it's from a close friend, family member, or coach as well. Like, I think that's an important thing to point out too. And from your perspective, how does coaching help people when it comes to staying accountable to these new habits, and what role does self-awareness play in this as well?
Yeah, really good question. And yeah, like I think I've fallen into that trap in the past of I need to solve this all by myself, but you don't know what you don't know. So having someone who can create this space where it is safe to challenge your beliefs or challenge yourself or establish new strategies can be a really valuable space to be in. And yeah, like I think having that kind of accountability partner is huge, because I'm thinking of one study in particular where they surveyed, or they did an experiment basically with two groups of university students. And what they wanted to do was try and reduce the amount of kind of distracted learning that was going on. People were on their laptops or they were on their phones. So they were trying to reduce the amount of tech that was being used in the classes. And, they split them into two groups. They both received training on, this is the importance of not being distracted, and this is how much your learning suffers when you are distracted, so they got the information. And so both groups got that. Then one group, they each wrote like a personal statement of, I am going to commit to not using my phone or my laptop in class. They created some kind of personal statement. And the other group, they created like a social contract where, people were influencing each other and they agreed to this as a group. And that second group had much less distracted learning in the end. So they achieved much better outcomes. They learned a lot more and they stuck to it more so than just someone doing it by themselves, of committing it to themselves. And so I think having that sort of accountability partner that can nudge you along and bring you along with them, not doing the work for you, very much putting you in the driver's seat, but someone is there as well, doing the directions. Like, do you remember we said we were going to go in this direction? Okay, we're taking a left here, so that you're not getting distracted and going down different routes. That's one way. And I suppose then you mentioned as well the question around, self-awareness being huge. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. If you're not tuned into yourself, your kind of beliefs, values, goals, it will be very hard to make these changes or achieve that more balanced, meaningful life. So yeah, I think self-awareness is absolutely huge, which again comes from that bit of self-reflection, but then also maybe someone kind of holding up a mirror to you a little bit and maybe asking you a question of, and you're kind of going, oh, I never thought about it that way. I think that's something that a lot of people who coach or have been coached will have experienced, that I never saw it that way before.
Yes, some of my favorite people are the people who get you to go, never thought that way. As frustrating as it can be sometimes, like it can be put you in an uncomfortable situation. You can realize, oh shit, I'm wrong on this thought. I need to change my mind. But I do appreciate it at the same time. I think it just helps you expand and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have people like that in your circle. And again, that might be a friend, it might be a colleague, it might be a coach. I think if you don't have someone in your life at the moment that makes you go, never thought about it that way, then yeah, I'd recommend you try and find someone who does.